Hello, I am Tony, and this is a video that will attempt to answer the question, why is Chris-Chan famous? This video will not focus on our history, rather on ourselves as an audience, more specifically, the American audience. What makes Chris-Chan so famous in American cyberspace, and why do we as Americans continue to become so entranced by this tragic individual? Let's find out. But first, let's contextualize the situation for the uninitiated and unfamiliar. Christine Weston Chandler, formerly Christian and born as Christopher, is a quote-unquote internet celebrity and artist. She is professionally known as being the creator of an independently produced comic series featuring the character Sonichu, an amalgamation of the two video game characters Pikachu from Pokemon and Sonic the Hedgehog. She is most known for being a vulnerable target for online trolls and a self-destructive individual with little to no regards to privacy and health, be it mental, physical, social, or otherwise. If you want to learn more about the history of Chris-Chan, I recommend viewing Gino Samuel's series on Chris-Chan for a comprehensive experience. If you want a more condensed version, I recommend Sachumo's video on the matter and or the Gamer from Mars' video series on it. There is also a dedicated website to documenting everything related to Chris-Chan, which will be provided in the description. In lieu of the impending subject matter, viewer and research discretion will be advised. Before we dive into the socio-analysis, I must state that what I am about to say is based on sociological trends from a mixture of historical and contemporary viewpoints and not based on psychological trends on each individual consumer of media, including Chris-Chan herself. This is my interpretation as an American consumer of media of Chris-Chan's rise to infamy and her celebrity legacy. That being said, the following should be taken as theoretical at the very least, and I would love to start conversations that delve further into this subject of Chris-Chan's celebrity. Without further ado, you have been warned. I want to start off with a general overview of Chris-Chan's rise to stardom. The main reason why Chris-Chan is so popular in America is what her persona represents. A mentally ill man-child whose self-destructive behavior and naivete continues to torment her ever since her introduction in the public eye. We watch her as she gradually descends further into depravity and insanity, hoping that either she will bring herself out of this downward spiral on her own or someone else will, or, more pessimistically, knowing that her fate is sealed and she will forever languish in her pit of despair. Despite the current audience Chris-Chan has garnered over the past decade and a half, it did not start out with a majority of people being observers and commentators, but provocateurs. The people who made Chris-Chan famous in the first place were trolls, who would post preliminary comments on online forums like Encyclopedia Dramatica and 4chan about Chris-Chan's eccentric character and her magnum opus, Sonichu. From there, word about this weird man-child spread across the internet, and as is the case with sites like Encyclopedia Dramatica and 4chan, forums known to house toxic content, their interest would grow into exploitation for personal gain, exclusively in the form of manipulative online trolling. Why would these anonymous posters go out of their way to comment and explore Chris-Chan and her eccentricities? It is simply because she is out of the ordinary. Why do they think she is out of the ordinary? Because they view her as being mentally inept. In an environment where political correctness is not as present as in the real world, stereotypical ideas about certain vulnerable individuals are more likely to pervade across internet forums and be treated as more of a triviality than as a genuine concern. especially if it involves people with a preconceived notion that mental illness is inherently a negative trait. That happened to be the case with Chris-Chan. The overall culture of trolling Chris-Chan is defined as making fun of a man-child and getting a reaction out of her by playing on her insecurities, whatever they may be. The reactions those trolls received from Chris-Chan were not just simply of negative feedback, but were at times reciprocated with actions in response to the troll's demands, which soon became the preferred modus operandi of most of the trolls who interacted with Chris-Chan. This aspect of interaction only exacerbated the notion that Chris-Chan may be suffering from a mental illness that makes her incapable of responding accordingly to manipulative ploys. Soon enough, it became more of a morbid curiosity than a campaign to prank some hapless sap. That morbid curiosity of how far people were willing to go to manipulate the naivete of Chris-Chan and how gullible she was to inadvertently intensify her own self-destruction has led to the thought that Chris-Chan is indeed not like other humans, but instead like a freak show, whose only purpose was to be supervised and thrown around like a basket case. It was not until May of 2009 where Chris-Chan would, for the first time ever, be introduced in the mainstream media.
Thing I've seen in a really long time. What the F is up with this guy? And he was the guy. Do you have I Got a Fish?
I got it right here, yeah.
I got a fish, would you like to make a wish? I got a fish, would you like to make a wish?
This radio episode from The Toucher and Rich show would be one of the first instances of casual observers making an impact on the celebrity of Chris-Chan. Her online antics would appear later on multiple other radio shows like Kevin and Bean, as well as Opie and Anthony.
Back to this nerdy dude. Nerdy guy, nerdy boy.
She looks familiar.
Anyway, after that, the second topic, the one where I spanked myself.
And it was because of her celebrity that a select handful of dedicated videos on YouTube were made that revolved around the history of Chris-Chan. She even made a few television appearances, including a spot on MTV's Velocity.
Lance, honey, quit playing dress up and finish cleaning your room right now.
And multiple news stories covering her.
Do not hate. Hate is not so good. And to be paranoid is a bust. Feel the love that comes from us, and try to feel love that you can offer, at least from within yourselves, for yourselves.
All of these mainstream and borderline mainstream appearances highlight the notion that the internet history of this single individual is indicative of a mentally unwell person. Whether or not we are educated and more sensitive to the topic of mental health, trolls and observers alike can come to the swift conclusion that Chris-Chan is unique in a way that exemplifies the real-life manifestation of all of the mentally ill characters audiences have consumed from past sources of media, especially those who are out of touch with social norms and keep failing to meet them. It doesn't matter if the audience is morally good, evil, or neutral. This preconception of mental illness captures our attention because of the possibilities it holds to solidify the ultimate fate of the individual suffering from it and how it might affect us, personally or not. In the wake of Chris-Chan's exposure, there is one factor to her celebrity that serves as not only a multiplier to her stardom, but to her notoriety and interaction with her audience.
I want everything about my house off the internet! Now!
As a consequence of Chris-Chan's proverbial mental illness, her tendency to self-disclose herself was the catalyst to a burgeoning parasocial relationship between her and her audience. Ever since the early trolling attempts of 2007, Chris-Chan's self-disclosure incidents, which were most likely as a result of feeble attempts to quell her insecurities about her identity that she felt were challenged by trolls, has led to troll and observers alike to learn more about who this Chris-Chan is as a character, her weaknesses, her personal secrets, and her environment. All of this information coming out of the darkness of her personal sphere increased her social presence, both in the realm of her professional escapades with Sonichu and her personal life with her family and other people around her. It goes without saying that the impact of the internet only compounded this parasocial relationship, which evolved from what can comparably be summarized as cyberbullying to a niche subject of internet lore that is constantly going through changes as long as Chris-Chan herself keeps interacting with her audience, either directly or indirectly. With more people learning about Chris-Chan and her history, there will be a variety of people from different backgrounds that can either relate to Chris-Chan or revile her based on her actions, symbolizing the complete opposite of productive and successful. And some of them act as an objective observer in order to learn more about this individual and what led her to become what is essentially a tragic nobody. Whether or not they hold the same feelings as other more emotional members of the audience is up for debate. Despite the objectiveness of this portion of the audience, the most important role they play is the evolution of who we perceive to be the reality Chris-Chan is living in. This effect is what solidifies Chris-Chan as an enduring celebrity among internet users. That being said, interest in the specific individual does tend to wane eventually, as the initial excitement of Chris-Chan's obscene and degenerative antics start to lose its spectacle. In 2009, an online forum was created whose sole purpose was to document every single happening involving Chris, whether it was online or, if possible, in real life. It was known as the Quickie, later to be rebranded as Kiwi Farms, with a separate website being created at a later date to house what is essentially a Wikipedia equivalent of the history of Chris-Chan, or Christory. The effort to document her life story can be summarized as a continuous media event that serves as the culmination of Chris-Chan's stardom. She first became famous for being as weird as a mentally ill individual. She would soon become famous for being well known for being famous because of her supposed mental illness. If we were to label Chris-Chan as being one of the chosen greats, she would be great in tragedy and degeneracy. However, what makes her so different from the other individuals the audience comes in contact with, either online or in real life? We may all have friends or family members who partake in the same actions as Chris-Chan, to varying degrees of severity. The differences between them lie in the amount of attention they receive. We know why they receive attention. In Chris-Chan's case, it is an example of a realization of a mentally ill character from the media past. From a mixture of getting a reaction and publicizing it for others to see, it fabricates a feeling of spontaneous enticement that originates from an individual who is portrayed as unpredictable due to her mental illness incapacitating her abilities to think as logically as other more perceptive individuals. Although the audience has a major role in making Chris-Chan famous, Chris-Chan herself does play a role in unintentionally maintaining her character, as sad as that may be. It is because of her character and tendencies that she is unable to move on with her life and away from the public eye. This is what contributes to her continuous downward spiral and her continuous documentation, resulting in a continuous interest that gradually builds up her legacy. With the presence of the internet and with a history of self-destruction, her celebrity has given way to an unholy creation, one that leads to Chris-Chan's eventual downfall. As stated before, how the audience's parasocial relationship with Chris-Chan brought upon by her self-disclosure and by how media events were created to make her stand out from the crowd, they have come together to seal the legacy of Chris-Chan and make her even more famous than previous times she became famous simply by people finding her and exposing her. It was because of Chris-Chan's purported mental illness that set the stage for people to take advantage of her, And it was because of the information they received from people wanting other people to learn more about Chris-Chan that they wanted to create even more events that would rocket Chris-Chan and themselves into the spotlight. What they would soon become was the greatest continuous tragedy in postmodern history.
A YouTube personality called Chris-Chan has just been arrested in Virginia on, of all things, incest charges.
As these events by the most devious of trolls were made, more people flocked to observe because they wanted to either satisfy their enticements or contribute to the conversation, making them very minor celebrities in the process. Media events spawning even more media events. A continuous cycle of attention that doesn't seem to be quelled anytime soon, only until the audience's interest dwindles to a null value, or if Chris-Chan completely isolates herself or passes away, will the celebrity of Chris-Chan fade away into obscurity, not including the legacy she will nevertheless leave behind as part of internet history and academic studies, should there be any. Out of everything I have talked about, what does this have to do with us as Americans? What makes Chris-Chan's celebrity uniquely American? Well, it has to do entirely to how we treat individuals with oddities such as mental illness that go against the normality of American society. People with mental illness in America are typically seen as a more exaggerated example of people who are incapable of holding down a successful and stable life, even with all of the good values that make up the typical American lifestyle. As such, people with mental illness are singled out and ostracized. Coupling this with the necessity to bring more attention to it to a wider audience through the medium of media events makes this anomaly turn into a stereotype, and even into a stigma. The stigma that still persists even in the present day, even to people who are rightfully reviled by American society because they are mentally ill. People who are mentally ill have had their chance to take advantage of all of the opportunities America offers, but their degradation to what America fears most results in them being shunned and not representative of American success. They don't take the effort to be normal and represent the values America holds dear: success and happiness. Conversely, more Americans are starting to recognize that mental illness is more of a community problem than an individual problem. Efforts are being made to make people better understand those suffering from mental illness and create a bond with them in order to eliminate the stigma and disprove the stereotypes that plague public perception. For Chris-Chan, we know that she is mentally ill, and we know that we cannot save her now. But what we can do is learn more about her and why she became the way she is. I want to reiterate that these theories are my own interpretations as to why Chris-Chan became famous in America. That being said, I would be most honored if more people continued the discussion of Chris-Chan's celebrity and stardom. The more we talk about it, the more we know what to do and what not to do when considering making a vulnerable individual famous. Thank you to everybody watching and discussing. Goodbye.